I'm starting it just a little early today. And of course, yesterday was, I tried to start at 10 o'clock, but Facebook was just not letting anybody do anything yesterday. So I'm finishing up the talk I gave in Tokyo a number of years ago, 2006. And it was a public lecture where I was sort of introducing Western ceremonial magic in general, and the magic of the OTO in particular. And it wasn't a long lecture, and there were questions and answers at the end of it. But we just got through the first section day before yesterday, and we're finishing up today. And the sentence just before the last sentence I read was, but my old Western conditioning made it hard for me to sit still long enough to really get inside myself. This is my attempt at being a first-rate Eastern mystic. It was like I was trying to run Eastern software on my Western hardware. I needed to find something like Western yoga or Western Zen. I eventually found what I was looking for in ceremonial, the Kabbalah, and the writings and the work of a man called Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was born in 1875 and died in 1947. He was a member of the Golden Dawn in London from 1898 until it dissolved. He had a terrible reputation throughout his life. Newspapers called him a black magician and the wickedest man in the world. He enjoyed his evil reputation. He thought it was funny at times. He believed that if people were ignorant and uneducated enough to believe his writings were evil, then they deserved to be frightened by him. When I was first introduced to his writings, he also frightened me. I could tell he was a great genius and very knowledgeable about Western ceremonial magic, but his writings were far beyond what I could easily understand. He wrote as if his readers were also geniuses and also knew a lot about magic. He also wrote as if all his readers knew when he was joking and when he was not. For some reason, I continued to read and study Crowley, and I soon had the very good fortune to meet and study under three people who knew Crowley when he was alive and who understood what he was talking about. One of them, a man named Israel Regardie, was Crowley's secretary in Europe during the 20s and was an early member of one of the offshoots of the Golden Dawn. The two others, retired Army Major Grady L. McMurtry and his then-wife Phyllis Seckler McMurtry, were two of a tiny handful of surviving members of one of Crowley's own magical societies, Ordo Templi Orientis, or the OTO. Grady and Phyllis initiated me into the OTO in 1975. And currently, I am the United States Deputy Grand Master of the Order. I hope I said Deputy Grand Master of the Order. I'm currently United States Deputy Grand Master of the Order. It's almost impossible to talk about modern ceremonial magic without also talking about Crowley. Even people who did not like him admit that he was the most brilliant and influential magician of the 20th century. Crowley took the teachings and the rituals of the Golden Dawn and expanded them to bring them up to date with what he called the magical formula of the new aeon. The subject of magical formulae and magical aeons is very important to our understanding of modern ceremonial magic. It's a very big subject, and I've written quite a lot about it in my book, The Magic of Aleister Crowley, and several other books. Briefly, the magical formula of the aeon, or age, is based on humanity's current understanding of the universe and our place in it. Obviously, as we learn more about the world around us, everything we do and believe changes to reflect our better understanding. For instance, there was a time many hundreds of thousands of years ago when we humans spent most of our time finding food to nourish our bodies and keep us alive. We weren't too concerned about the universe around us, only insofar as it related to our food and our survival. We were, however, awed by one thing, a flesh and blood goddess that represented our preoccupation with finding food. This goddess was woman. Back in those days, we didn't know what caused women to become pregnant. We didn't have a 9-month attention span. Woman was the most mysterious and wonderful thing in our lives. Our limited understanding of the world around us made us think she could magically and mysteriously create new humans. She was the goddess of creation. Not only that, once the baby was born, woman could feed it directly from her body. This was big magic. Earth was also like the woman. It brought forth plants and animals to nourish us. Throughout this aeon, or age, mother was life, earth was mother, and God was woman. Throughout this aeon, our ancient ancestors practiced forms of magic that honored and tried to emulate the formula of the woman, the formula of nourishment. It was the spiritual expression of their understanding of the universe and their place in it. Crowley named this aeon after Isis, the great goddess of the Egyptians. We eventually learned more about ourselves and the universe. When we became truly aware that woman needs man to create babies, and the earth needs the light-giving rays of the sun to grow the plants that feed the animals and ourselves, then a new aeon was born, with a new magical formula. This time the magic was based upon the worship of the Father, the worship of the Son, and a preoccupation with death. Because the sun appeared to die every night and be reborn every morning, the magic that our ancestors practiced in this magical age reflected the formula that says life comes from death. This was a period in history when sacrifice dominated the spiritual life of humanity. Our ancestors of this aeon believed in a life-giving God who, like the sun, dies each night. In order to worship such a God and to make sure the sun came up in the morning, our ancestors practiced a type of magic that conformed to this formula. They ceremonially killed things, people and animals, and offered them to the god of death and life as a sacrificial bribe to assure that the sun would keep coming up. And sure enough, as long as they kept killing things and offering it to the dying sun, the sun kept coming up in the morning. I know this sounds like a primitive and barbaric practice, but it was based firmly upon our ancestors' most up-to-date understanding of the universe and themselves. In fact, this aeon of the dying god continued right up to modern times. Can you see this magical formula in the doctrines and myths of Christianity? Crowley named this aeon after the Egyptian god Osiris, husband of Isis and lord of death, I guess. Yes, the dead. As if I couldn't have guessed that. In 1904, through a series of visions he and his wife experienced in Cairo, Crowley learned that a new era in human evolution had begun. Humanity's understanding of the universe and ourselves had increased enough to bring about a new aeon, a new magical formula. The single most important change in humanity's consciousness that ushered in this new aeon is our understanding that the sun does not die, that it stays on all the time. With this knowledge that the sun is continually shining, humanity as a whole, whether all of us consciously realize it or not, is now informed deep down inside ourselves that our existence is also continuous. If the sun stays on all the time, then we stay on all the time. Death is a temporary illusion, just like night is a temporary illusion. I know this sounds like a very simple thing, but it is a profound advance in human consciousness. Crowley deeply respected the magical practices of the Golden Dawn, but he also saw that they were based on the old magical formula of the dying god. His new rituals and practices took what was still valid from the Golden Dawn and altered them, sometimes ever so slightly, to conform with the new formula. The formulas of the past still work. It's just that the new formula works so much better. What kind of deity represents this new aeon? It's not the earth and the mother goddess of nourishment of the aeon of Isis. It's not the father god of the dying and reborn son of the aeon of Osiris. The deity of the new aeon is a child. The child of the former two aeons. And the child's magical formula is that of continual growth. Crowley named this new age the Aeon of Horus, son of Isis and Osiris, the crowned and conquering child. He called the new magical formula the Law of Thelema. Thelema means will in Greek. It's the same true will I talked about earlier. In this aeon, it's not only our duty to discover our will and to do it, it's the law of the aeon that we do so. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. The key that makes magic work in the new aeon is for each of us to identify with the child, to realize that each one of us is the fundamental spiritual unit of the universe. I know this doesn't sound very magical, but it is. We are, each one of us, our own self-contained deity. We are suns, S-U-N-S. We are suns, not planets. Atoms, not molecules. Kings and queens, not subjects. The fundamental unit of society is not the family, not the community, not the nation, not the church, but you and me. And our spiritual duty is simply to grow and evolve. Ultimately, each magician is responsible for his or her own magical career. No one else can do magic for you. Magical and initiatory societies only serve as centers of guidance and education. They cannot make you a magician. They cannot project enlightenment on you. In many parts of the world, you can still make contact and become active in groups that teach the classic Golden Dawn curriculum and perform the Golden Dawn rituals and initiations. You can also find all the texts and rituals in published material. If you're resourceful, you can do all of the magical exercises and take yourselves privately through the degrees without ever having to leave home or meet another magician. Crowley and his colleague from the Golden Dawn, George Cecil Jones, created a very personal magical society based on the Golden Dawn model, which they called the AA. Unlike the Golden Dawn, which used grouped rituals and activities, the AA is very private. The student is in contact with only one person, his or her own teacher. Also, unlike the Golden Dawn, whose degrees were only symbolic of those levels of the tree of life that represent higher and higher levels of consciousness, in the AA, the magician must actually demonstrate to his or her teacher that he or she has actually attained that level of consciousness appropriate to their degree. Of course, most of the AA material is published, and magicians can start doing the AA work and study even if they have not met an AA teacher. And what is the nature of this magical work? What does a Western ceremonial magician actually have to do? In magic, it's very important to be able to keep the mind concentrated on the object of the operation. So at first, the new magician begins much like the Eastern mystic, who strives to gain control over his or her own body, mind, and breath. So at the beginning, the magician is encouraged to practice yoga and meditation and concentration exercises. He or she is then systematically to gain control over their magical world. To contact and control the forces of nature, represented by the four elements of fire, water, air, and earth, the new magician learns the rituals of the pentagram. To contact and control the forces of nature, represented by the planets and zodiac signs, he or she masters the rituals of the hexagram. But these are just exercises to attune the magician for the most important magical operation he or she can accomplish. Crowley called this great magical goal knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. And that's where we'll leave today, because Constance has returned with groceries from the Sacramento Natural Food Co-op. And actually, we won't take it up tomorrow. We're going down to Sprouts. I'll start this up again and finish off this lecture in the parking lot of Sprouts. So take a breath, and I'll see you in just a few minutes. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. I'll be back with part 3.